Today, I'm going to be elevating your game by talking about the most powerful hand traps in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Listen here, OG. If for some reason you think that hand traps that worked yesterday go work today, nah. Over the past couple of weeks, I've been noticing a few trends. Certain hand traps aren't as strong as they used to be, and others have came simply out of nowhere and are ridiculously powerful. Not only will I be giving you that information, I will also be breaking down where these hand traps work against some of the most popular strategies. Let's go ahead and jump on in. All right, big dog, the criteria, incredibly simple. Not only will we be ranking these hand traps based on how effective they will be against a plethora of decks, we will also take into consideration their impact against specific decks, as well as how adaptable they are in certain situations. And what I have to say about hand traps that people thought were completely untouchable will blow your mind. I even got the statistics to back it up. Another huge thing that I want to say is that we will be taking into consideration the best decks in the game, as well as the most commonly played strategies. Statistically, right now, the best decks in the game are Snake Eyes, Tenpai Dragon, and Voiceless Voice. But another thing that I want to talk about is Melodious. A lot of players are using it as a part of an engine for some of the more popular strategies, and it's also a really cheap deck and effective. People are really sinking their teeth into it, and I think we should take that into consideration. Let's go ahead and start off this tier list with everybody's favorite Ally of Justice card in Cycle Reader. By discarding this card from your hand, you can banish 2 light monsters from the graveyard. That can be incredibly effective against decks like Voiceless Voice. Let's take, for example, if you want to banish Low or Skull Guardian from the graveyard, but it also could be good against Melodious because there are times where they put cards in the graveyard. Yeah, I think I hyped this card up a little bit too much because I'm still gonna put it in Copium. In certain situations, this card can be a blowout against those strategies that I just mentioned. The problem with that is that Cycle Reader is really good in the earlier stages in the game and starts to wane off when your opponent gets more access to more resources. Also, another thing that I want to point out is that unless your locals is filled with Voiceless Voice players, it's not going to be worth it to play this card in your main board or your sideboard because there are better cards that just have more coverage and effectively do the same thing. Let's go ahead and move on to Infinite Impermanence. Since we know players are playing a ton of hand traps, really good counters to those cards are Called by the Grave and Triple Tactics Talent, something that Infinite Impermanence dodges both of. Also, another thing that has become really good about this card is being able to negate spell and trap cards on the field. Infinite Impermanence checks out against every single one of these strategies. It is still a must play. And if there's a best hand trap in the game, it's Infinite Impermanence for plenty of reasons. With Omni Negates out of the way, it's a lot harder to stop. It's a hand trap that can be used when going second. And like I said before, it dodges Triple Tactics Talent and Called by the Grave. The Bestial monsters have been creeping up in playability. Not only are they really good against Melodious and Voiceless Voice, they also have a place against Snake Eyes. Being able to banish cards like IP Masquerena to prevent the Flame Beard from placing is crazy good. Bestial monsters have become better than sideboard worthy cards. You can get away with mainboarding these cards even if your strategy doesn't necessarily gain from the Bestial cards. Though I will say, it's a little bit better, actually a lot better, when your strategy benefits from the Bestial cards. My dragon players, we be a Lost Rocket Dragon Link, but we up with the Bestials. Next is Effect Veiler, and there is a couple of problems with this card. Since Effect Veiler can only be used during the main phase, it becomes really bad against Tenpai Dragon when they get their filled spell. Also, as you already know, if a Voiceless Voice player has their continuous spell up, this card is completely useless, but so is a lot of cards. Even with Effect Negation being paramount right now, I think that Effect Veiler is no longer a must play. I think it's a solid choice. Unlike a lot of other Effect Negation hand traps, it is incredibly easy to manipulate your way around an Effect Veiler. Monster effects are starting to be moved away from being primarily used in the main phase and are being used in all of the other phases to avoid this card. It's still an incredibly solid Yu-Gi-Oh card, but it's not a card that if you don't play in your main board, then you side. You either main board this card or you don't play. Also works well with the Bestials. Chaos Hunter prevents players from banishing. This could be really good against cards like Dimensional Shifter. Bro, imagine it's 2024 and your opponent shifters you, but then they summon a monster and you summon the big Chaos Angel boy. Yeah, the big problem with that is that it's pretty easy to still get rid of Chaos Angel though. I got Angel in Copium right now, and I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon. Yu-Gi-Oh is just a little too fast right now, and Chaos Hunter can't keep up. Now, we did get a new hand trap in Vorburl, the Dragon Undertaker, and what this card says is that if a monster battles a monster, neither player can be destroyed by battle, because it's an illusion. Then it also says during the main phase, if a monster your opponent controls is sent to the graveyard, you can activate the following effect based on where this card is at activation. If it's in your hand, you can special summon. If it's on the field, you can make one effect monster your opponent controls lose 1500, and then if its attack becomes 0 by that effect, you can destroy it. The thing that I like about Vorburl is that it can be used offensively and defensively. All you have to do is get rid of your opponent's monster, but even if it's during their turn, if they're link summoning your stuff, you can just summon this to your field. After that, making an effect monster lose 1500 attack, and if it becomes 0, destroy it. I'm not 100% sold on that effect, but it can be incredibly good against strategies that summon a ton of little effect monsters. I personally think that the card is a sleeper. I think that this card has some nuances that are underexplored right now. Partly is because it's an illusion monster, and the other part is because, again, it can summon itself offensively and defensively. I love those type of cards. It's going to take some time to figure out where Vorburl actually ranks, but right now I think it could have some potential. Contact C. Contact C, for players that don't know, forces your opponent to use this card for a summon. Against Snake Eyes, I think you're absolutely cooking yourself. You're giving them a face-up card on the field to be able to manipulate. And against strategies like Voiceless Voice, I also think you're cooking yourself. You're just giving them another card to ritual summon with. But against Tenpai Dragon, there is currently no level 1 Tenpai Dragon monster, meaning that if you give them this card, you force them to synchro summon into 10 or 9, which they can easily do. It's Copium. This card's just crazy bad right now. DD Crow doesn't seem like a terrible hand trap right now, but the difference between DD Crow and the Bestials aren't big enough. A lot of times the cards that you want to hit in your opponent's graveyard are monsters, and they just so happen to be light or dark. I think that DD Crow becomes a lot more powerful when there's spells and trap cards that we want to hit as well, but for right now, I'm going to go ahead and put it in Sleeper. I think that it still can be used to an effect, but it's not as powerful as the Bestial. Now, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is where I have my first bold take. And if you guys agree with my bold takes, or if you have something to add on to them, let me know down below in the comment section. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring has been regarded as the best hand trap in Yu-Gi-Oh! For so long. I no longer think that's the case. And the biggest reason why I don't think that Ash Blossom is as powerful is because we don't have interactions where Ash Blossom can be as impactful as it once was. If you guys didn't know, Ash Blossom is best when it's negating a card that will leave the field. Take, for example, if you're negating a card like Branded Fusion that your opponent can no longer activate again. You're doing amazing. But where Ash Blossom really isn't good is that if you're negating a card that has multiple effects, especially if your opponent got the first effect off before you got to Ash Blossom it, meaning that they got value from it, or if your opponent can make Heat of the Fire Charmer and make you pay. Currently, the top and most played decks in the game do not care about Ash Blossom. It's not effective against Tenpai Dragon. Snake Eyes can easily play around it. There's too many cards for Voiceless Voice to be effective with, and the Branded Fusion for Melodious is not once per turn. I still think that Ash Blossom is good because it has coverage against every single Yu-Gi-Oh strategy, but I don't think it's a must play. And it's actually starting to be represented as people are starting to sideboard or not play Ash Blossom at all. I know I might sound completely crazy for saying that type of information, but that's the reason why I made this tier list. Ash Blossom is still good, but it's not as powerful as people think, so use it wisely. I think the king of Yu-Gi-Oh right now is effect negations and cards that get rid of cards. Those are really essential. And that's where we move to Droll and Lockbird. At the very best, the pinnacle, Droll and Lockbird is sideboard. Now, I don't think that Droll and Lockbird is a main board worthy cards against the top 4 decks, but it is a great sideboard worthy card because there's so many other rogue strategies that play for free if you don't side Droll and Lockbird. Just previously at YCS Brazil, Dark World got a top. Now, you know we can't let Dark World players get a top. We ain't gonna never hear the end of it. Droll is 100% one of those cards that you check your local area for, and if you see a lot of players doing those search things, then that thing slide into your side deck. Fantastical Dragon Phantasme is also a side-worthy Yu-Gi-Oh card. And I think that this card would have been main worthy if it weren't for Tenpai Dragon and Voiceless Voice. Not only does this card out cards like SP Little Knight, having it on the field means that Appaloosa needs to stay over 2400, but more importantly, it prevents your opponent from using effective hand cards against you. Most Yu-Gi-Oh Zoomers don't even know about the targeting protection that Phantasme has, and you a lot of times will find yourself in a good situation because you can take advantage. Psy-Frame Gear Gamma. Gamma, hands down, is one of the most impactful cards in the game. It does exactly what we want. It not only negates a card effect, but it destroys it. This card is easily a must-play Yu-Gi-Oh card if it were at 3. Right now, I'm gonna go ahead and put Psy-Frame Gamma into sideworthy. I think it does really well when you play it with Psy-Frame Gear Delta, and this card is really good because it stops spell cards. Being able to stop your opponent's best spell cards and monsters is a perfect tandem, and because Gamma is limited to 1, mixing Delta and Gamma together is normally the way to go inside of your sideboard. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, everybody's favorite. This card has seen a surgence in Yu-Gi-Oh play, but there's some things that I really want to put you on game with this card. Yes, statistically, it is one of the best hand traps. It actually, statistically, should be in must play. But that's why you come to these tier lists. You didn't come for me to babble statistics. You want me to give you information to stay ahead of the curve. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is good against Voiceless Voice and Tenpai Dragon. It's pretty mid against Snake Eyes. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is good against Voiceless Voice and Melodious. Ironically, it's not as good against an experienced Tenpai Dragon player, and it's complete dog against a Snake Eyes player that knows what they're doing. And the reason why it's not as good against a seasoned Tenpai Dragon player is because they'll just activate the Spill spell, but won't use its effect. I've gotten cooked a couple of times by doing that. Now, don't get me wrong, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is still a great hand trap that you can play inside of your main deck. It's just not a must play. It's a solid choice. Your experiences may vary. It may be an insane card that wins games. And there also will be times that it'll just sit in your hand and wave at you. It's almost 50-50. Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. You made fun of your boy for buying this card. It's still a side-worthy Yu-Gi-Oh card, though I will say that time rules are starting to become less important to the Yu-Gi-Oh card game because games do end at a timely manner. Ghost Bell in Haunted Mansion is actually the goo. Ghost Bell in Haunted Mansion is good against Melodious, it's good against Snake Eyes, Voiceless Voice, and Tenpai Dragon. The best way to beat Tenpai Dragon is to use your hand effects in the battle phase. And Bell can stop a critical aspect of Tenpai Dragon, which is summoning those dragon monsters back from the graveyard. Now, this is going to be a bold take, but I'm gonna put Bell in must play. I think that Bell will be the weakest must play card that I will put on this tier list, but you'll get so many rewards when playing this card against every single Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It's like modern Ash. The trades that you get with this card are very similar to what Ash used to do. Using this card simply trades with a card effect that's actually designated to be used for a big play or is going to the graveyard after its use. So it's hands down one of the better cards that can be used. I would say that Ghost Mourner has taken the spot of Effect Veiler as the second best interruption, and that's strictly because Ghost Mourner can be used in multiple phases. Now, as you already know, in the TCG, Ghost Mourner can't be used on our turn effectively to stop on-summon effects by your opponent. But in its defense, Effect Veiler wasn't doing that either. Always thought that Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries was copium, and the main reason why is because you can take away your opponent's best extra deck card and they'll just beat you with the next card. There is no strategy in the game that is simply reliant on one extra deck monster and loses without it. You're wasting your time by playing this card. The restrictions from gnome material are a little bit too much, though I will say that the card can be really good. The worst part about this card is that if you can find a deck that uses this card to its best potential, you lose the game every single time because you have no cards on the field. Nib is interesting because everyone is playing Nibiru, but it's a difference between if they're playing it in their main board or their sideboard. The card is effectively good in the strategies that it's good at. It forces some strategies to make half boards and other strategies to completely lose. Yeah, I think Nibiru is a must play either in your main board or your sideboard. You gotta have this card right now. Artifact Lancia is similar to Chaos Hunter. I think that this card is complete cope. So you want to prevent your opponent from banishing, but only during their turn. Damn, there's some cards in the game that this would be incredibly good at. Only if you could stop them on your turn too. I haven't given up on Miradora strictly because it's an effect negation card. It's also searchable through cards like Tempest and Steel Macnamut. Okay, maybe I'm coping there because who plays Tempest? Still though, effect negation card can't be negated. Sleeper. Waiting for that dragon strategy to take full advantage of Miradora, and then we up, boys. If your strategy can play Herald of Orange Light, Looking at you, Melodious player, you would be foolish not to play Psyframe Gear Gamma inside of your deck. This single-handedly is the best hand trap in Yu-Gi-Oh! The only problem is that 90% of Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategies can't play it. I actually know a decent amount of pro Yu-Gi-Oh! Players that have been experimenting with Voiceless Voice just because of this card. It is that impactful. Dimensional Shifter. I got a good take for you guys. Dimensional Shifter is great against Voiceless Voice. It's okay to bad against Melodious depending on how many Melodious cards they're playing. If they're playing monsters like Aria and Elegy, they can just set that up and then pass their turn, and they're almost guaranteed to get another turn. This card is complete terrible against Tenpai Dragon, and I think it's mid against Snake Eyes. Now, before you guys start looking at me crazy, Dimensional Shifter is considered powerful because it's a card that's used to end players' turn. Against a skilled Snake Eyes players, that's not happening. Not only do they still make interruptions with monsters like SP Little Knight, they also can still follow up by using Snake Eyes Oak to retrieve the cards that were banished. Then the filled spell card still sets them up for the next turn. Now, the killer part for me is that if you look away from the meta towards a lot of the rogue strategies that people are using to beat the meta, they're all playing Shifter. Have you ever shifted a player that plays Shifter? I think because of those two facts, Shifter is better off as a side-worthy Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. And that may seem crazy. I think that this especially holds true if you are playing a deck that gets hurt a little bit by Shifter. Maybe a strategy like Yubel or even Vanquish Soul, you should consider putting them in the sideboard instead of mainboarding them. Next is Skullmeister, a card that can prevent effects in the graveyard. It's actually not terrible. It can stop cards like the Ritual Summoning and Voiceless Voice, Snake Eyes, Flame Urge. I think that this card is an absolute sleeper. I wish that there were more applications for Skullmeister. Right now, I think it's a card that could pop up, but I would worry a little bit because since Ghost Mourner is being played a lot more, people are starting to chain block, and that kind of ruins Skullmeister. And lastly is Saravis. You won't believe where I put this card. In a Yu-Gi-Oh! Meta where there is still a ton of targeting, Saravis is one of the very few cards that can be used offensively, preventing your opponent from targeting your monsters with cards like Infinite Impermanence, but then it goes a little bit further. In the sideboard, people are actually siding Change of Heart and Mind Control. This card stops that too. It's one of the very few counters in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game. I think this is a solid choice Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. It's actually crazy how many applications that Saravis can come up with, but I will say that this card is not going to be your 9th, probably even your 12th hand trap that you place inside of your deck. It also may even be just a little bit closer to sideboard worthy, as we know that more targeting cards come in the sideboard. But I want to hear what you think. And that's all that I have for the hand trap tier list. I really want to know what you guys think about where I put these particular cards. And if you guys want to see another type of tier list, let me know down below in the comment section. I can't wait to see what you guys have to say.